3 times daily. The rancher's next move altered history forever. The sun had barely risen over the rolling plains of the Hale Ranch, casting long, soft shadows across the solar-green pastures. Jackson Hale, a tall man with weathered skin and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of both experience and curiosity, stepped out of the modest dome-shaped home he had built decades ago. Around him, wind turbines spun lazily in the morning breeze, and small, robotic drones hovered above the fields, scanning the crops for any signs of disease or water shortage. For Jackson, mornings were sacred. They were a time to connect with the land and the creatures he cared for, a rhythm that had remained unchanged even as the world beyond his ranch evolved in ways he often found hard to follow. With a slow exhale, he adjusted the straps of his tool belt and moved toward the northern paddock, where the solar cattle were grazing. These weren't ordinary cows. They were hybrid livestock, part organic, part engineered for efficiency and resilience. They ate less, produced more, and were surprisingly intelligent, responding to Jackson's commands with subtle movements or soft lowing sounds that made him smile. "Morning, girl," he said softly to one of the younger cows, a golden-brown calf with curious eyes that always seemed to watch him more closely than any other animal. He ran a hand over her head, feeling the warmth and vitality that told him she had slept well and was ready for the day. The small drones circled above, scanning data and projecting minor adjustments to the artificial sun reflectors that helped balance sunlight for the pasture. As Jackson finished his rounds, he noticed a faint shimmer near the western ridge. At first, he thought it was a trick of the morning light, something that happens often when sunlight hits the spinning solar panels just right. But as he squinted, he saw that the shimmer pulsed gently, almost like it had a heartbeat. Curiosity prickled at him, stronger than caution. Jackson walked slowly toward the ridge, boots crunching over dry grass, the wind tugging at his wide-brimmed hat. The shimmer grew more distinct with each step, and as he approached, he saw that it wasn't light alone. It was something else. A small, translucent orb hovered just above the ground, glowing faintly with shifting colors, as if it contained a tiny universe inside it. Jackson stopped a few feet away. He had seen a lot in his life, from alien probes to strange weather anomalies, but this was different. It didn't feel threatening. Instead, it felt aware. And somehow it seemed to be waiting for him. He reached out a cautious hand. The moment his fingers brushed the orb, a sudden pulse of light and sound enveloped him. He staggered slightly, blinking, and then saw visions, 3 at once, overlapping yet distinct. He saw a future where the ranch had expanded, with crops growing in precise patterns that seemed impossible. He saw a past he had never experienced, with alien ships observing the planet silently. And he saw a version of the present where the animals on his ranch seemed to understand language better than he had ever imagined. Jackson stumbled backward, breathing heavily. The orb hovered calmly, the colors shifting gently, as if it were smiling. He rubbed his eyes, half convinced he was dreaming, but the air smelled of earth and morning grass, and the faint hum of the wind turbines reminded him he was very much awake. "All right, old friend," he muttered, not entirely sure why he called it that. "Let's see what you're about." Over the next hour, he experimented cautiously. He touched the orb again, and each time it gave him visions, different ones, always 3, always subtle, never overwhelming. Sometimes they were simple, a crop disease that would appear in a week, or a small animal needing help. Sometimes they were extraordinary, flashes of technology he had never seen, ways of arranging water channels or solar panels that seemed impossible but somehow made sense. By mid-morning, Jackson had realized something remarkable. The orb was not just showing him visions, it was teaching him. It was nudging him toward solutions that could improve the ranch, make life easier, and even help his neighbors if he chose to share the knowledge. As he returned to the house for breakfast, he thought about the possibilities. He had always believed that humans had a special gift, the ability to learn, adapt, and create. But here was proof in the most unexpected form. A small, glowing orb that responded to his curiosity, rewarded his patience, and in a way respected him. Over eggs and synthesized protein bacon, Jackson outlined a plan. He would continue his usual work, feeding livestock, checking drones, and maintaining the solar panels. But he would also experiment with the orb's suggestions. Each morning, he would make a small change, a gentle test of the ideas the orb presented. And he would record everything in his log, not just for himself, but for the future. By noon, Jackson was back outside, implementing a suggestion the orb had shown him. A subtle rearrangement of the irrigation system that used natural contours of the land to increase water efficiency. The robotic drones helped him adjust the channels, and by evening he could see the difference. The soil looked richer, the plants perked up, and the cattle grazed more contentedly. That night, under a sky filled with stars, Jackson sat outside his home, the orb floating nearby, softly pulsing. He thought about the day, about the visions, and about the strange, gentle feeling that humans, through curiosity, care, and cleverness, could make a real difference, not just on a small ranch, but in ways that might ripple outward, far beyond his imagination. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was part of something larger than himself, something important, something extraordinary, and somewhere deep in his heart, he knew that this was only the beginning. The orb had chosen him, or perhaps he had chosen it. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the next move he made, even the simplest one, could change not just his ranch, but the world in ways he had yet to understand. Jackson leaned back in his chair, eyes on the horizon, listening to the gentle hum of the wind turbines, the soft lowing of the cattle, and the quiet pulse of the orb beside him. 3 times daily, he realized, he would touch the orb. 3 times daily, he would see the visions. And 3 times daily, he would have the chance to shape the future. A breeze stirred, and the orb shimmered with a brighter light, as if acknowledging his thought. Jackson smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility all at once. He didn't know exactly how history would remember him, or even if it would, but he knew this. For the first time, he understood that an ordinary human, through curiosity, patience, and intelligence, could become something extraordinary. And with that thought, Jackson Hale, rancher, innovator, and now the keeper of a strange, luminous orb, prepared for the day ahead, unaware that the first ripples of change had already begun to spread quietly, subtly, and inexorably across the land. The next morning, the sun rose in a pale, golden haze. Jackson Hale stepped out of his dome-shaped home with a calm certainty he hadn't felt before. The ranch was alive with the quiet symphony of his morning chores, the soft hum of wind turbines, the gentle whirring of drones above the pastures, and the low, contented sounds of his solar cattle as they grazed. But something in the air felt different. The orb floated near the edge of the pasture, pulsing gently as if waiting for him. Jackson approached it with the same cautious curiosity as yesterday. He raised a hand, and instantly 3 visions flashed before his eyes. The first vision showed the irrigation channels he had adjusted yesterday, but this time, the plants were growing taller and healthier than ever. Even the soil seemed richer, darker, as if the land itself had absorbed some hidden energy. The second vision revealed an older Jackson showing a neighbor how to adjust their own water channels. And the third vision was the most surprising, the cattle, moving as a group, arranging themselves in ways that looked almost intentional, as if they were cooperating to improve the pasture. Jackson blinked. "Well, this is new," he muttered. Over breakfast, he thought about what he had seen. He realized that the orb didn't just show possibilities, it encouraged small, thoughtful experiments. Each vision was a gentle nudge toward improvement, a subtle way to help him, and perhaps, eventually, others, reshape life for the better. He decided to put the visions into action immediately. First, he adjusted the placement of solar reflectors across the pasture, based on the orb's suggestions. The changes were small, slight shifts in angle to maximize sunlight for certain plants, but by mid-morning, the difference was already noticeable. Leaves seemed brighter, the soil slightly warmer, and the cattle moved toward the sunlit areas naturally, almost as if they instinctively knew where to be. While Jackson worked, he noticed that the orb's presence seemed to affect more than just the land. The drones, which normally followed programmed paths, started hovering in patterns he hadn't programmed. They circled the irrigation channels and even hovered over certain cows, scanning them in a way that suggested enhanced awareness. Jackson realized the orb might be influencing the machines, gently guiding them to optimize life on the ranch. By midday, he had completed several small experiments suggested by the visions. He rearranged a few fences to create better grazing paths, planted a new section of crops using the orb's guidance, and even adjusted the feeding schedule of the cattle to match natural energy cycles he hadn't noticed before. Everything he touched seemed to respond, not magically, but with a logic that made sense once he saw it. Jackson wiped the sweat from his brow and sat on the edge of a fence, watching his handiwork. The pasture looked alive, not just with plants and animals, but with possibility. He felt a quiet pride, knowing that his careful attention, combined with the orb's guidance, had created something better than he could have imagined alone. As he pondered the changes, a flicker of movement caught his eye. At the far edge of the property, near a small grove of trees, a vehicle hovered silently. Jackson squinted. It wasn't any type of vehicle he had seen before. Sleek and reflective, it glided without sound, and inside he could make out figures moving. Curiosity, stronger than caution, pushed him forward. He approached slowly, and as he neared, a panel on the vehicle opened. Two figures stepped out. They were taller than humans, with smooth, pale skin that shimmered faintly under the sun, and eyes that seemed to glow softly. Jackson froze for a moment, not out of fear but awe. "Greetings," one of the figures said in a calm, musical tone. "We are observers. We have detected unusual temporal fluctuations originating from this location." Jackson's brow furrowed. "Temporal, what now?" The figure smiled gently. "Energy patterns, small changes in probability that suggest growth, adaptation, and innovation. We have come to understand how your species interacts with these phenomena." Jackson nodded slowly, understanding more from the tone than the words. The orb, pulsing gently at his side, seemed to react to the newcomers, shimmering with brighter colors. The visitors spent the afternoon observing Jackson as he worked. They didn't interfere, only watched, and occasionally made soft comments that guided him in subtle ways. For example, when he struggled with a section of irrigation, one of the figures gestured, and he suddenly saw a small adjustment that made all the difference. The changes were always gentle, never forceful. By the end of the day, Jackson realized something remarkable. The orb, his own ingenuity, and the visitor's guidance together were creating a chain reaction. Small improvements on the ranch led to better crop yields, healthier livestock, and more efficient energy use. Each success built on the last, and each experiment gave him confidence to try the next. That night, Jackson sat on the porch, looking at the stars. The orb hovered near him, pulsating softly, as if reflecting the rhythm of his thoughts. He thought about the visitors, the visions, and the subtle changes he had made. The realization came slowly, like sunlight breaking over the horizon. Humans, through curiosity, observation, and thoughtful action, could influence the world in ways even the most advanced technologies might not predict. He pulled out his log and began writing. The orb shows visions, not just the future but possibilities. Small changes lead to better outcomes. Animals, crops, even machines respond in ways I do not fully understand yet. Perhaps this is what it means to guide the future gently, thoughtfully, and wisely. Days passed, and Jackson continued his routines with renewed purpose. Each morning, he touched the orb 3 times as the visions appeared. Each day, he implemented 1 or 2 small changes, careful to observe the results. And each evening, he recorded everything in meticulous detail. Soon, he noticed another change, a social one. Word had spread among the neighboring settlements about unusual improvements in the land around Hale Ranch. Curious farmers began visiting, asking questions, observing Jackson's methods. He welcomed them, sharing what he could without revealing the orb, focusing on principles rather than secrets, observation, patience, and gentle experimentation. One neighbor, a young woman named Lyra, watched as Jackson adjusted a water channel. "How do you know where to place it?" she asked. Jackson smiled. Not really. I watch, I test, and I adjust. Life usually tells you what to do if you're willing to listen." The visitors were intrigued. They asked questions about the cattle, the crops, even the drones. Jackson shared his knowledge freely, encouraging them to try their own experiments. Slowly, the ripple effect began. Neighboring farms started seeing improvements: crops that grew faster, soil that retained water better, animals that seemed healthier and more responsive. Jackson realized that the orb had not only enhanced his own abilities, it had amplified the potential of those around him. Human ingenuity, compassion, and adaptability were being multiplied by careful observation and small, deliberate action. One evening, as the sun set behind the western ridge, Jackson noticed the shimmer of the orb growing brighter than usual. 3 visions appeared before him. The first showed the ranch expanding, not just physically, but in influence. Other settlements adopting new practices, animals thriving, and humans collaborating in ways that inspired hope. The second vision revealed distant planets, where similar subtle ripples were being observed. Other species were noticing humans, not as threats, but as clever and resourceful beings capable of solving problems through intelligence and care. The third vision was the most personal. Jackson, older now, sitting on the porch surrounded by friends, neighbors, and even some of the alien visitors, sharing stories about the early days of experimentation and discovery. He saw laughter, shared wonder, and the quiet pride of knowing that his curiosity had helped more than just himself. It had started a movement. Jackson blinked and turned to the orb. "All right," he whispered, "let's see where this goes next." That night he slept under the stars, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch. The cattle moved contentedly in the pastures, the wind turbines hummed softly, and the orb pulsed gently beside him. He felt a deep connection, not just to his land, but to the possibilities of humanity, to the idea that thoughtful, careful action could ripple outward and change the course of history, one small experiment at a time. As he drifted into sleep, Jackson knew one thing with certainty. The first ripple had begun, and he was at the center of something extraordinary. Weeks passed, and the Hale Ranch began to look more alive than ever. Crops grew in neat, strong rows, the solar cattle moved efficiently through pastures, and the small drones hummed softly, moving in patterns that seemed almost alive. But it wasn't just the ranch that was changing. The neighboring settlements, inspired by Jackson's methods, began to experiment on their own land. Early one morning, Jackson stood on a small hill near the northern paddock, looking out across the plains. Smoke-free cooking domes and small wind turbines dotted the landscape of nearby settlements. He could see farmers tending their crops, adjusting irrigation channels, and even testing small energy grids. Each improvement mirrored something he had done or had learned from the orb. He smiled, realizing the ripple had begun. "It's spreading," he whispered. A small group of neighbors approached, carrying tools, seeds, and ideas. Lyra, the young woman who had first visited weeks ago, led them. Her bright eyes reflected a mixture of curiosity and determination. "Morning, Jackson," she said cheerfully. "We tried your channel method on our southern field. It worked better than we imagined. The water flows naturally and the plants are already showing stronger growth." Jackson nodded. "Good. Remember, it's about careful observation. Watch the land, listen to the animals, and adjust slowly. Quick fixes rarely last." Other neighbors joined the conversation, each sharing their successes. One had experimented with stacking reflective panels to improve sunlight distribution, inspired by Jackson's adjustments. Another had built a small wind collector to store energy for nighttime irrigation. Every idea was small, simple, and thoughtful, but together they created significant improvements. Jackson realized something important. Humans had an incredible ability to adapt, improve, and share knowledge. They didn't need flashy technology or powerful machines, just curiosity, careful observation, and willingness to experiment. And once one person succeeded, others followed. Over the next few days, Jackson and the neighbors held informal gatherings. They shared ideas, compared results, and experimented together. Lyra had a knack for testing animal behavior. She observed how the cattle moved in response to changes in water flow or grazing schedules and recorded patterns that could be repeated across other farms. Another neighbor, old Mr. Cadden, focused on crops. He noticed which plants thrived under certain lighting patterns, which soil mixtures absorbed water best, and how natural wind flow helped distribute pollen more evenly. Jackson facilitated these experiments but rarely imposed his own methods. He had learned from the orb that humans worked best when allowed to explore and discover, not just follow instructions. And he saw the results. The settlements were thriving, quietly but steadily. One afternoon, as Jackson repaired a section of the solar fence, he noticed the orb pulsing brighter than usual. He paused, sensing another vision forming. 3 flashes appeared. The first vision showed a distant settlement beyond the hills where crops were failing. A small group of humans worked together to adjust irrigation, using knowledge inspired by Jackson's methods. Within days, the land began to recover. The second vision revealed the animals, livestock, wildlife, even small insects, responding positively to the improved balance of water, sunlight, and soil. Their health improved, and subtle patterns of behavior emerged that hinted at intelligence and cooperation far beyond what had been expected. The third vision was perhaps the most remarkable. It showed the settlements communicating with each other across the plains, sharing knowledge through simple signaling systems, drones, and messages. Human ingenuity, sparked by curiosity and careful observation, was spreading like wildfire, but gently, peacefully, and sustainably. Jackson knew what he had to do. He gathered the neighbors and explained his vision. "We're part of something bigger than ourselves," he said. "Every small change we make, every experiment we try, can help others beyond this hill, this valley, even this planet. Humans have a gift, the ability to think, to solve problems, and to work together. We just need to use it wisely." The neighbors nodded. They understood that their actions mattered. They were no longer just tending their own fields. They were part of a larger experiment, a quiet revolution in how humans could live and thrive in harmony with the land. As the days passed, Jackson noticed subtle, almost magical changes. The crops grew faster than expected. Livestock seemed to communicate in ways that felt almost intentional, and the land itself appeared healthier. The orb remained near him, pulsating gently, as if approving each careful decision. One evening, Jackson climbed to the highest hill on the ranch and looked out over the settlements. Fires from cooking domes dotted the landscape, and soft lights glimmered from the small energy grids. Humans moved about efficiently, coordinating efforts, sharing ideas, and learning from one another. Jackson felt a deep sense of pride, not for himself, but for his species. Humans were remarkable. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, and not the most technologically advanced compared to other species Jackson had heard of. But they had creativity, patience, and compassion. They could observe, experiment, and adapt in ways that allowed them to thrive even in harsh conditions. And with the orb's gentle guidance, their abilities were multiplying. A week later, visitors arrived, this time not from neighboring settlements but from further away. Small scouts, human and non-human, came to observe the changes in the region. They were polite, curious, and cautious, but their interest was clear. Jackson greeted them warmly, showing them the improvements on the ranch and in the nearby fields. "They've heard about your methods," Lyra explained. "Others want to see how you've done it." Jackson nodded. "It's not just me, it's all of us working together. Observation, patience, and careful experimentation, that's the key. Anyone can do this anywhere." The visitors spent several days observing, asking questions, and learning from Jackson and the community. They marveled at the subtle but powerful changes in crops, livestock, and energy management. Slowly, they began to replicate the methods in their own lands. Each new success created another ripple, and the knowledge spread farther than Jackson had imagined. One evening, Jackson sat with Lyra under the stars. "I never thought a simple ranch could make this much difference," he said. Lyra smiled. "It's not the ranch. It's you and everyone here. Humans have always been clever. We just needed a reminder of what we're capable of." The orb pulsed between them, a soft glow that seemed to echo the sentiment. Jackson realized that this was more than just an experiment. It was a demonstration of humanity's potential. Small, thoughtful actions, combined with curiosity, collaboration, and care, could shape a better future, without force, without conflict, simply through intelligence and compassion. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effect grew. Neighboring settlements shared knowledge, experimented with new ideas, and coordinated efforts to improve energy efficiency, crop health, and livestock management. Jackson watched as humans applied creativity in unexpected ways. Drones were programmed to communicate small tasks between farms, crop rotations were optimized naturally, and even the behavior of animals was observed and gently guided to improve balance in the ecosystem. Jackson's heart swelled with pride, not pride of ownership, but pride in potential. Humans were remarkable. They were creative, curious, and capable of solving complex problems with intelligence and care. And now, with the orb's guidance, they were proving it to themselves and to the world. One morning, as Jackson prepared to touch the orb, he noticed something new. Faint ripples in the sky, subtle changes in light patterns, and tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in the air. He realized that the orb's influence might extend beyond the ranch, touching distant lands and perhaps even distant worlds. Three visions appeared. The first showed distant settlements thriving, learning from one another, and sharing knowledge across vast distances. Humans were connecting in ways that strengthened the entire network of communities. The second revealed animals and plants adapting naturally to new methods, thriving in ways that seemed almost magical, but were entirely the result of careful observation and thoughtful action. The third vision was personal. Jackson, older now, standing with neighbors, friends, and distant visitors, watching the human network grow stronger. Laughter, discussion, and wonder filled the scene, a quiet celebration of human ingenuity. Jackson blinked and smiled. "This is just the beginning," he said softly. "If humans can do this here, we can do it anywhere. We just need to keep observing, experimenting, and working together." The orb pulsed gently, a soft rhythm that matched Jackson's heartbeat. For the first time, he felt the full weight of possibility. Humans were special, not because they were the strongest or fastest, but because they could adapt, learn, and improve. They could solve problems creatively, collaborate effectively, and shape a better future, one thoughtful action at a time. As night fell, Jackson stood on the highest hill again, watching the lights of the settlements below. Fires burned softly, drones hovered in coordinated patterns, and the land itself seemed to hum with quiet life. The ripple of change had begun, and Jackson knew that humanity, through curiosity, intelligence, and care, would continue to spread that change far beyond the horizon. For the first time, he felt certain humans were ready for the future, and the future was ready for them. Weeks turned into months, and Hale Ranch had grown into a hub of quiet innovation. The ripple that Jackson had started now reached far beyond the neighboring settlements. Farmers, engineers, and curious observers visited from distant lands to learn the subtle art of careful observation, experimentation, and improvement. Yet, despite the successes, Jackson felt a new weight pressing on his mind. The orb had never revealed its purpose fully, and he wondered if the ripple he had started could go too far, too fast. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the western ridge, the orb shimmered more brightly than he had ever seen. It hovered in the air, pulsing gently, and Jackson knew a vision was coming. 3 flashes appeared, each stronger and more vivid than before. The first vision showed a distant world, humans interacting with unknown civilizations, sharing knowledge and solving problems collaboratively. It was a vision of growth, understanding, and cooperation, but it hinted at a fragile balance. One wrong step, one impulsive action, and the harmony could unravel. The second vision revealed the orb itself, a fragment of something larger, a temporal intelligence designed to observe, test, and guide civilizations. Jackson felt awe and fear mingling within him. The orb was not just a tool, it was a part of a greater system, something ancient and incomprehensibly wise. The third vision focused on him. Jackson saw himself standing on the hill, older, surrounded by neighbors and distant observers. The orb pulsed beside him, and he realized that his actions had consequences far beyond the ranch. Every experiment, every small change was part of a larger puzzle, one that required responsibility, patience, and care. When the visions faded, Jackson exhaled slowly. He had felt the weight of the future pressing against him, a reminder that even small actions could ripple outward in unexpected ways. The orb floated near him, almost as if it were aware of his thoughts. The next morning, the visitors returned, this time the alien observers who had first come weeks ago. They moved with a calm grace, their soft, glowing eyes observing everything carefully. Jackson greeted them with the respect he had learned to reserve for those who understood more than they revealed. "You have learned well," one of the aliens said in a musical tone. "Your species demonstrates adaptability, creativity, and patience. But the orb is more than a guide. It is a fragment of a temporal intelligence that measures the ability of civilizations to interact with change responsibly." Jackson nodded slowly. "I think I understand. It's testing us or helping us learn how to handle something bigger than ourselves." The alien observer's eyes glimmered. "Precisely. The orb amplifies careful thought and ethical action. It does not force, it guides. Your actions have created a rare synchronization effect, a harmony between human creativity and temporal possibility." Jackson thought about the word synchronization. It sounded complex, almost impossible, yet he could feel its truth. Every small improvement on the ranch, every shared idea with neighbors, every gentle observation had contributed to this effect. Humans, through intelligence and care, were influencing threads of time in subtle ways. "Does that mean history can be changed?" Jackson asked cautiously. The alien observer tilted its head. "Not violently, not by force, but yes. Your species can gently guide outcomes, improve conditions, and expand potential. The key is responsibility. Every action has consequences, and every choice shapes what comes next." Jackson looked at the orb, floating quietly beside him. He thought about the crops, the animals, the neighbors, and the distant settlements that had begun experimenting with his methods. Each choice, each careful adjustment, had already changed the course of local history. And now, with the orb's subtle influence, the changes could reach farther than he had imagined. Over the next days, Jackson spent long hours observing the ranch, the settlements, and the ripple of progress spreading across the plains. He realized that the orb did not simply give visions, it tested patience, creativity, and ethical responsibility. Every time he acted thoughtfully, the ripple grew stronger and more harmonious. Every time he acted carelessly or selfishly, he felt a subtle resistance, a reminder that the orb was teaching, not commanding. One morning, he gathered the neighboring community under the shade of a large tree. The visitors watched silently, their presence both reassuring and awe-inspiring. "Friends," Jackson began, "we are part of something larger than our fields, our animals, or even our settlements. Every small improvement we make, every experiment, every observation, can help people beyond our hills. We have the chance to guide, to help, and to share. But we must act responsibly. Patience, careful observation, and cooperation are more important than speed or glory." The neighbors listened intently. They understood that the ripple they had created was not just about crops or livestock, it was about human ingenuity itself, amplified and multiplied. Lyra stepped forward. "Jackson, how do we know if we're doing it right?" Jackson smiled. "We watch, we listen, and we adjust. Nature, animals, and even each other give clues. Every action has feedback. That's how we learn. That's how we improve." Days turned into weeks, and Jackson began documenting the patterns he saw more rigorously. He recorded not just successes, but failures, subtle missteps, and adjustments. He noted how certain changes in water flow affected the land, how animals responded to rearranged grazing paths, and how drones could optimize minor tasks without interference. Every detail mattered. Meanwhile, the alien observers continued to watch. They occasionally offered guidance in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. A gesture here, a faint hum there, a suggestion in response to a question. Jackson learned to trust the orb's and the aliens' quiet guidance, relying on observation and reflection rather than instruction. One afternoon, the orb pulsed brightly, and Jackson knew another vision was forming. 3 flashes appeared. The first vision showed distant settlements thriving. Humans shared knowledge, communicated through simple networks, and adapted their methods to local conditions. The ripple of improvement spread steadily, without disruption or conflict. The second vision revealed animals, plants, and even small machines adapting naturally to changes. Every improvement built on the last, creating a balanced system that reflected careful observation and ethical action. The third vision was personal. Jackson saw himself standing on the hill, surrounded by neighbors, visitors, and distant observers. The orb hovered beside him, pulsating gently. He understood that he was part of a rare phenomenon, humans interacting with temporal potential in ways that respected life, intelligence, and balance. That night, Jackson lay under the stars, reflecting on the orb's lessons. He realized that humans were remarkable not because they could dominate, but because they could adapt, create, and collaborate. The orb had amplified this gift, allowing him to see that responsibility, curiosity, and care were as powerful as any technology. The alien observer spoke again quietly one evening. "Jackson Hale," one said, "your species demonstrates a rare ability. You are learning to guide change gently, ethically, and creatively. This is the foundation of a civilization that can thrive across worlds." Jackson nodded. "I understand. Every choice matters. Every small action can ripple outward. We just need to be thoughtful, careful, and kind." The orb pulsed softly beside him, almost like a heartbeat. Jackson realized that the puzzle was not about power but about harmony. Humans could influence events, shape outcomes, and improve life, not by force but by intelligence, observation, and ethical action. Weeks later, he gathered the neighbors again. This time, the discussion was more profound. They spoke about the ripple effect, shared long-term strategies for collaboration, and emphasized patience. No one acted impulsively. Every idea was tested, observed, and refined. The orb hovered nearby, pulsating in response. Jackson felt the weight of responsibility, but also the thrill of possibility. The ripple had begun. The humans around him had already multiplied its effect, and with care, it could continue to grow, touching lives far beyond their immediate world. As the sun set over the western ridge, Jackson stood on the hill, looking at the settlements, the fields, and the quiet lights of distant homes. He felt a deep sense of purpose. Humans were special, not because they were strong, fast, or numerous, but because they could observe, adapt, and improve. With curiosity, patience, and care, they could shape the future in ways that no other species could. And somewhere deep in his heart, Jackson knew that the orb was only the beginning. He touched it gently, 3 times, and the visions appeared. Humans cooperating across lands, animals thriving in harmony with the land. And himself, older, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and observers, witnessing the quiet revolution of human ingenuity. The orb pulsed in agreement, and Jackson felt a profound truth settle over him. Humans were ready to guide their own future. And the future was waiting, quietly, patiently, for them to rise to the challenge. The morning sun painted Hale Ranch in gold as Jackson Hale stepped out of his dome-shaped home. The wind whispered through the solar fields, and the small drones hummed softly above the pastures. The ranch had changed, but so had Jackson. The orb, still hovering nearby, pulsed gently, as if acknowledging the work that had been done and the ripples yet to come. Jackson walked across the fields, observing the cattle and the crops. The animals moved gracefully, responding almost intuitively to the paths he had laid out and the gentle schedules he maintained. The crops were taller and stronger than ever, arranged in patterns that optimized sunlight, water, and soil nutrients. Even the smallest insects and birds seemed to move with a balance and purpose that reflected the care taken by everyone in the community. For Jackson, the changes were not merely practical, they were proof of something extraordinary. Humans were capable of shaping their world in ways that honored life, intelligence, and collaboration. It had taken months, careful observation, and countless small experiments to reach this point. Yet every step had been worth it. The neighboring settlements had grown, each one adopting principles learned at Hale Ranch. Small networks of communication had formed. Messages carried on drones, coded light signals, and simple observation notes connected farms across valleys and hills. Knowledge traveled quickly, yet gently, spreading solutions to problems without disrupting the lives of those who relied on the land. Jackson met with Lyra and several other community leaders near the center of the ranch. They had gathered to review the latest improvements. Lyra held a tablet displaying the growth patterns of crops from several distant settlements. "Look at this," she said, pointing at the screen. "Crops are thriving in ways we didn't expect. People have adapted your methods and improved them. It's spreading faster than we imagined." Jackson nodded, a soft smile forming. "It's not just me, it's everyone working together. Humans are learning from each other. That's what makes this so powerful. Our strength isn't in one person, it's in collaboration." As they spoke, the orb pulsed brighter, as if responding to Jackson's thoughts. He touched it gently, 3 times, and the visions appeared. The first vision showed humans far beyond the Hale Ranch, on distant colonies, across oceans, even beyond the planet. They were observing, experimenting, and sharing knowledge. Technologies that improved energy efficiency, crop growth, and animal care were spreading, adapted to local conditions. Humans were thriving, not through force or speed, but through careful thought and collaboration. The second vision revealed ecosystems balanced in harmony. Animals, plants, and machines interacted with one another in subtle but powerful ways. Each element responded to its environment thoughtfully, guided by observation and care. Jackson saw the beauty in these connections, the intelligence of humans shaping life gently, with respect. The third vision was personal and profound. Jackson saw himself, older now, standing on the hill where he had first discovered the orb. Around him were neighbors, visitors from distant settlements, and even alien observers. Laughter, curiosity, and shared wonder filled the scene. He realized that his simple choice to touch the orb, to act thoughtfully, had created a legacy that would endure far beyond his own life. Jackson exhaled slowly, feeling a deep sense of purpose. The orb's lessons were clear. Responsibility, observation, and care could guide change more effectively than force or ambition. Humans were capable of shaping the future with intelligence, patience, and collaboration. And now they were beginning to prove it to themselves and to the universe. Later that day, the alien observers returned. Their presence had become familiar, comforting even. They moved silently, watching the ranch and the settlements from a distance, noting the subtle patterns that had emerged. One approached Jackson directly, its glowing eyes reflecting soft light. "You have succeeded," it said in a melodic tone. "Your species has demonstrated rare qualities, adaptability, creativity, and ethical responsibility. The synchronization effect continues to expand. Your influence has reached farther than you know. The ripple you began is shaping the development of your civilization." Jackson nodded humbly. "I didn't do it alone. Everyone here, neighbors, visitors, even the animals and the land itself, played a part. Humans are remarkable when we work together and think carefully." The alien observer pulsed with soft light as if approving. "Indeed. This is the essence of progress. A civilization that observes, adapts, and collaborates can thrive across worlds. Your species embodies this potential. You are guiding your own history without destruction or harm. That is extraordinary." Jackson watched as the observer returned to its companions. The scene reminded him of something important. Progress was not measured by speed or domination, but by understanding, careful thought, and ethical action. Every ripple mattered, every small decision contributed, and the combined efforts of many created something far greater than any individual could achieve alone. Over the next few months, the ripple expanded further. Distant settlements and colonies applied lessons learned at Hale Ranch. Schools for observation and experimentation were established, focusing not on competition, but on cooperation and understanding. Technologies were adapted to local needs, each improvement carefully tested before implementation. Humans were learning from each other, quietly but powerfully, and the effects reached far beyond Jackson's imagination. Jackson continued his daily routine, touching the orb 3 times every morning, noon, and evening. Each vision guided small experiments, subtle improvements, and ethical choices. He taught neighbors to observe first, act thoughtfully second, and always consider the consequences of their actions. And slowly, humans everywhere began to recognize the value of patience, collaboration, and intelligence over force or speed. One evening, Jackson climbed the familiar hill, the orb hovering beside him. Lyra joined him, and they watched the sun dip behind the western ridge. "Look at it," she said softly. "All of this started with you noticing something strange on the ridge." "Who would have thought a simple ranch could change so much?" Jackson smiled, looking out at the thriving settlements, the flowing irrigation channels, and the balanced pastures. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us, and maybe that's the point. Humans have always been capable of extraordinary things when we work together and think carefully. We just needed the chance to see it." The orb pulsed softly, a gentle rhythm that seemed to echo Jackson's own heartbeat. He reached out and touched it 3 times, and the visions appeared once more. Humans cooperating across lands and planets, animals thriving in harmony with the environment. Himself older, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and observers, witnessing the quiet, unstoppable progress of human ingenuity. Jackson felt a profound peace. The ripple had spread, the lessons had been learned, and humanity's potential had begun to flourish. He realized that true progress wasn't about dominating the world or conquering others. It was about observing, learning, improving, and collaborating. And humans, with their creativity, patience, and care, were uniquely capable of achieving this. The next morning, Hale Ranch welcomed a new wave of visitors. Some were scientists, some were engineers, and some were simply curious neighbors from distant lands. All came to learn, to observe, and to share. Jackson welcomed them with open arms, guiding them through the fields, explaining the irrigation methods, the crop arrangements, and the ways the cattle had adapted. But most importantly, he taught them the philosophy behind it all: careful observation, thoughtful experimentation, and collaboration. Over time, the story of Hale Ranch and Jackson Hale became known across planets. Humans were recognized by other species, not for their strength or speed, but for their intelligence, ingenuity, and ethical approach to problem solving. Small, thoughtful actions, multiplied across communities, had created a legacy that transcended borders, ecosystems, and even worlds. Jackson never sought recognition or fame. He continued his routines, touched the orb 3 times daily, and mentored those who came to learn. But he knew, deep in his heart, that humanity had proven itself in ways that mattered most. By solving problems, improving life, and collaborating with care and creativity. One evening, as the sun set behind the western ridge, Jackson stood with Lyra and a group of neighbors, watching the stars. The orb floated nearby, pulsating gently, as if reflecting the quiet rhythm of life itself. Jackson realized that the ranch, the orb, and the ripple they had created were symbols, not of power but of potential. Humans were capable of extraordinary things. They could observe, learn, adapt, and collaborate in ways no other species could match. And now, with the lessons of the orb and the ripple that had spread from Hale Ranch, they were beginning to prove it to themselves and to the universe. Jackson took a deep breath, feeling the wind on his face, listening to the gentle hum of the drones, the soft lowing of the cattle, and the quiet pulse of the orb. For the first time, he felt completely at peace. The ripple he had started, the lessons he had learned, and the community he had nurtured had all come together. Humanity's potential was no longer hidden. It was alive, thriving, and ready for the future. He touched the orb once more, 3 times, and smiled. The visions appeared, not as instructions but as reminders. Humans, united in thought and action, could improve the world. Life in all its forms could thrive in harmony. And even a simple rancher, acting with curiosity, care, and intelligence, could leave a legacy that endured far beyond his own lifetime. Jackson Hale, rancher, mentor, and guardian of the orb, stood quietly on the hill, watching as the stars emerged one by one. He knew that the legacy of careful action, intelligence, and collaboration would continue to grow, spreading across lands, across planets, and across generations. The ripple had begun. Humanity was ready, and the future was waiting.